And welcome everybody to the writing stream. It's good to be back once more. Apologies for my absence last week, but sometimes you have to take a holiday, right? It's good. Now, I have not got for you tonight just one, but in fact two guests. I mean, how about that? Don't say I never do anything for you, right? Okay, so it's going to be fun. We've got two people on the site. We've got the wonderful Stuart and we've got the wonderful Linda. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce them. But of course, before we do that, we must do the thing, because the thing is the thing. So who have we got in the chat tonight? We have Anne-Marie from FBP gets first place. Well done, Anne-Marie. Good to you. Flexible Knot is here. The Harkonnens are here, ready to evade Arrakis, which is always good to see. Commander Terra Firma is here. A regular from the west coast of the United States of America, no less. The Arrakises are here, ready to fight off the invasion of the Harkonnens. Commander JR98 is here. Have a Boo Boo is here. Scrolling down the list, Commander Dustfield is here. Penny Grubb is here from FPP as well. Hello. Alan RP32 is here as well. So the crew assembles, and more people are always coming in as and when we do. Now, what I need to do, because we've had some technical problems, as you might suspect, but we managed to solve them. I'm confident. Fingers crossed, lucky rabbit's foot, etc. So in a moment, I'm going to unmute my special guests, and I'm hoping that everything works. Mad Monksoft is here as well. Right, so let's try this. Let's see if it works. Right, I'm going to start with the top right. Linda, are you there? Introduce yourself. Say hello.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes,
yes, it's working. Yay!
Yeah, I've turned back on my computer microphone, so
fantastic.
So that's good. Yeah.
We have the telephone. Anyway, that's Linda. Linda Nicklin. Am I pronouncing that right? Linda Nicklin?
Yeah, you can get. Yeah. Sometimes I get Linda Neckline. That's a good one.
Excellent. Okay, well, Linda Nicklin. We'll go with Nicklin. I think that's nice. And Stuart Aken. Are you there, sir? Are you there?
I am indeed.
Fantastic.
Yes. Stuart Aken here.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay, so that's good.
Live and well.
And you see, we're all being you can tell. I mean, I was very pleased when we all came on the Discord, a quarter of an hour ago, just to get things tested up and working. We're all in our studies, all looking very, very, very authory indeed, with our bookcases and everything else behind us. Well, looking the part. I think that's really, really good. So technology is working today. We're a three-way call. We're streaming it onto the internet. I mean, things are good, right? So this is excellent. So fingers crossed, everything holds together. And everything continues to work. Right, so with no further ado, can I prevail upon the two of you, one at a time, probably is probably going to be good, to give us, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute on who you are. I mean, don't go into anything, top secret or anything, but only stuff that you're prepared to show live on the internet. Linda, say hello to the internet. What would you say to the internet? Introduce yourself.
Hello, internet. It's me, Linda Nicklin. Retired occupational therapist, decided to have some fun. I made myself a list, 111 items long, of fun things to do when I gave up work.
Wow.
And I have to say, the last 10 years, I've probably done most of them. One of them was find a voice, which led me to writing and joining a choir, and here I am.
Brilliant. Yeah. Oh, that's 111 things. I haven't got 111 things to do at all, actually. So that's quite, especially since you've already done them. So are you going to have to get another 111 things now?
Well, I did have a reserve list, and for a while I put ones on to replace, because I quite like 111 number. It looks good. I quite like that. And I did a little bit of searching for 111s, and I found a 111 platform in Grand Central Station.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And a railway connection in the middle of Wales was 111. So I've been on some interesting little detours to do with this, but
excellent. I like the sound of that. That's quite good. Brilliant. Okay, well maybe we'll explore 111 in a little bit more detail as we go along. But over to Stuart. Stuart, you'll be known to a few people on the stream actually. From fantastic infamy. Yeah, they're all good at info. So anyway, so for those of you who don't know the wonder that is Stuart Aken, introduce yourself to the viewers.
Yeah, I've been around for a few years. Done 49 years of employment in 14 different jobs, but started writing when I was 19. Started by doing illustrated photographic articles for the British Photographic Press.
Okay, wow, yeah.
And then went in for a Radio Times drama competition and wrote a radio play, which was broadcast and came third in the competition. That was the year that Willie Russell of Blood Brothers.
Okay. When was that then? That was a while back.
That was in the 1970s. and I met Tom Stoppard. He was one of the judges.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sat in front of me in a white suit, and asked me if I deliberately set the play in a picaresque mode, a word I'd never heard and didn't understand. So I just said yes.
Well, especially if you. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Right, okay. Well, that just introduces the caliber, I suppose, of my guest tonight, which is excellent. So, for those of you in the chat, if you want to chuck any questions in at any stage, then obviously feel free to do so. Now, what I'll do is I'll do my best to field any questions. Well, in fact, the moment I asked that, somebody's already asked the question, so let's go for it. It says, Stuart, did you write your first play on a typewriter, or was it by hand?
It's a good question. It was on a typewriter, a manual typewriter.
Yeah.
You know, I'd taken typing lessons, and at the time I was living in a flat on a farm, and the farmer suddenly decided he was going to go to America. So I decided I'd better go and get a job so I could buy a house. As it turned out, he never went to America, and we stayed in the farm for another 6 years. But I'd learnt to type. And then at that point, for 2 years, I couldn't actually go anywhere near a keyboard because I was far too busy. And so I forgot all about it. So I still, with 2 fingers and a thumb.
Excellent. I must admit, I haven't used a typewriter for many years, but I started on a typewriter as well, so I feel quite comfortable with that. That's quite good. Right, so let's find out a little bit about what's going on. So, I mean, Stuart, you've already mentioned. I'm going to go back to Linda in a minute, but Stuart, you've already mentioned. You've been writing since the age of 19. So Linda, is that something that you've had on your list of things to do since a young age? Were you always excited about writing, or has it been a more recent thing that's happened?
I've always wanted to write. I probably wasn't fully formed until until I was in my 40s in my head. So that made it a little bit more difficult. I did write a whole novel, but that's lost in like many iterations of Word or whatever.
Right.
And I've got half of it on a portable hard drive that doesn't speak to anything. But I did enjoy it, and I learned a lot reading that. What I realised was I didn't know how to edit, and I could have ended up with it began, it finished, and that was the rest was rubbish.
Right.
So I decided to step back from that until I learned how to be a bit kinder to myself, and read a great deal.
Okay.
And,
and
on many levels.
And observed and took lessons from other writers.
Yeah.
Okay, that's quite good.
Just, well, how did they do that then? How did they make that happen? That kind of question, the hows rather than the whats.
Yeah. So who would you have on your list of influential authors that you've kind of gone? I've taken some lessons from them. Who's on your inspirational list of people?
I have to say Terry Pratchett.
Okay, excellent. I shall wear my hat in honour of him.
Yeah, it's just the joy of his writing and the way that he can spin a joke through a whole book, and it's still funny. Just the power of that and characters, fabulous characters.
Okay, excellent. Well, he's a brilliant choice. You've got no argument for me with Terry Pratchett whatsoever, so that's good.
And another one I really enjoyed is North and South.
Mm-hmm.
It's Elizabeth Gaskell. Yes. Yeah. I'm challenging myself a little bit more to things where you have to concentrate and it isn't a lap a page.
Yeah. That's good.
Everything. I like all the Jack Reacher, Lee Child books. Just the power of the energy that drags you through. You don't want to put the book down. So I go to different kinds of authors for different
types
things
of inspiration. Yeah.
How did they do that?
Excellent. So I suppose, Stuart, same sort of question. So who have you got in your list of inspirational authors from days gone past?
I read very much as a child because we didn't have a television until I was 14.
Right.
And so I used to go to local library, and by the time I was 11, I'd gone through the entire set of children's books available. So I asked the librarian, who was a rather formidable madam.
They always were back then, though, weren't they?
Oh, sure.
Librarians were quite scary.
Hilda was her name, and she was very big, and I was very small. And I went and had a word with her. Can I read some of the adult books, please? So she said, well, you always bring back your books in good condition and always on time. So yes, you can have one book at a time, but it must be passed before me. So I took the first book off the shelf that I'd heard of, and it was called All Quiet on the Western Front.
All right. Yep.
Yep. Which, as anybody who's read it will know, is full of events with prostitutes, lots of swearing, lots of violence, etc., because it's set in the First World War from a German point of view. I passed it in front of her, and she didn't blink at all. She just said, yeah, that's fine. Because, of course, it was a classic.
Ah, so it's okay then. Yeah.
So I thought, after that, I can have anything I like. And as a result, I reckon I've read well over 10,000 books in my time.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty good going.
And the authors, I suppose, I mean, out of that lot, you can imagine there's a lot. So out of that lot, the ones that I would list would be Ray Bradbury,
Yep.
Isaac Asimov, of course, John Wyndham, Iris Murdoch, Richard Adams, Margaret Atwood, Graham Greene, Jane Austen, William Golding. Need I go on?
No, that's a good list. There's some well respected names on that on that list. That's really, really good. It's interesting to hear what people have read in the past. I mean, I quite a few people on that list I'd probably cite as well. So that's really, really good. Okay, so if we start talking about direction of heading towards writing a book. Now I have to be a bit careful here because Stuart, you are, I believe you have the honour actually of being Fantastic Book Publishing's most prolific writer. Because I think you've beaten me at the moment by one book. So yeah, clearly we're going to have words about
surprise,
that.
Really. There's another one on the for you, by the way.
Yeah, well, no, I can't keep up with the pace that you go. So so you've won. I'm afraid that's it. It's game over. So yeah, congratulations on that. But so and I've read some of your books. I've certainly read the Generation Mars stuff. I haven't read your current one, The Excess of, yet. So we'll get onto that one in a minute. And I suppose Linda as well. You've got the Storm Girl as your. I suppose we can call it your debut novel. Is that fair?
Yes, I would say so, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so
what a debut novel! Brilliant. What a debut novel!
You've got to be a bit of a disadvantage here because I haven't read it yet. I've got a list of all the MABLE authors, and I like when Dan and the crew basically said, "Could you interview everybody?" I said, "Yeah, it'd be absolutely great fun, but no way I'm going to get all those books read in that time. It's just going to be impossible." So it's they're all on my TBR list, as we say nowadays. But I will get that. So what, Linda? What was the sort of process that led up to you writing? But you sort of said you've retired, and a lot of people, I suppose, think maybe retirement is a good time to write a book. But is there more than that? Is there something that basically there's a story I need to tell because of some reasons? Or what's the motivation behind writing a book?
Well, first of all, I'd say that retirement is a myth because everybody knows you've then got spare time and asks you to do. I think after I gave up one job and ended up with two, right. And I gave up them both and ended up with three.
I've heard about this, that retirement is your busiest time of life, which sounds a bit scary, actually. Yeah.
Yes, all kinds of freelance things. And for a little while, you're quite flattered that people don't think that you're past it and ask you to do things. And after a while, you think, actually, this is no fun at all. And that wasn't the point.
It's supposed to be relaxing.
Yeah, it was meant to be much more leisurely than this. I think that one of the things that I was overwhelmed with when I gave up work was a massive wave of creativity.
Okay, interesting.
All the things that had been put to one side whilst I was concentrating on a proper job.
Yep.
Just didn't go away, and it was there, and it was like as soon as I gave it space, it was there, and I just was driven to do all kinds of creative stuff, including writing, and that's when I decided that I better just sit down and do it. So I wrote Storm Girl by hand in a book because I didn't want to jinx it by making it look too serious.
Okay, so you actually wrote it on pen and paper, effectively.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, that's quite cool.
I'll never do that again.
I would give myself repetitive strain injury if I did that.
It was a nightmare The second draft was a nightmare, not least because I can't read my own handwriting. But it was.
So how did you do that then? Did you have because obviously on the word processor you can just do save as and then do it again, but you can't do that with pen and paper. So what did you write it out again?
Yes, I had to transcribe it,
Right.
but that was like my second edit, like my second draft.
Yeah.
But it meant that I learnt to write everywhere, anywhere. I don't have to be in a certain location, and I
Okay.
don't have to have a certain ritual. I just took it with me and I wrote it.
So
Just came out. So
you literally just got a book and a pen and that's it.
yeah,
You
I wrote
can.
it.
Wow. Okay, that's.
Mm.
I'm trying, especially for redrafting it. That sounds like a nightmare to me. Trying to figure that out.
Yeah, it
Interesting.
was.
Okay. Okay. So that's good. So Stuart, I mean, I suppose a similar question for you really is I mean you write a lot of stuff, right? And I've read some of your stuff, and there are and we'll get onto this. Obviously, there are themes in your work that I think we could probably you could probably pull out in time. The latest book. What was prompting you to put that one together?
Yeah. I've been a member of Greenpeace since the 1980s when they came to this country. So my information that I've received about the environment has always been there, it's been brought up to date.
Yep.
And I became more and more convinced that we are heading towards a real disaster.
Right.
If we get on the way we are at the present moment. So I wanted to incorporate that idea into a book.
Okay.
That's what became An Excess Of, because I used the title because that is one of our problems. There is an excess of population, an excess of greed, an excess of very bad politicians.
No argument there. No.
Decency, it's and because I suppose I have a daughter now. Well, I've had a daughter for 30 years.
Not just in the last week, unexpectedly
no.
though.
Yeah, indeed. But you care about your kids.
Sure.
And and the world that we are leaving behind for them is frankly quite appalling.
Okay. Yep.
I had to put this sort of concern into words, but of course into words that hopefully would be entertaining and readable.
Yeah.
But that's what drove me.
Okay, that's interesting. So I mean, this is kind of the main point, and actually a couple of bits from the chat actually. Commander Glenn says basically, wow, that sounds like a serious task to write it, read it, draft by hand. So congratulations, Linda. So I think you've wowed a few people with that particular thing. That's really good. So I mean, let's go on to this topic because and we'll cover off the kind of some of the other bits and pieces I think as we go through in terms of inspirations for writing a book and various other bits and stuff. But this business of the kind of eco situation, shall we say, that we find ourselves in, is obviously a rich source of inspiration for storytelling. But it's more than that, isn't it? I mean, you've kind of touched on that, Stuart. Is there's a sense, obviously very strongly from your perspective, that we're in serious trouble. So, is that something that you've kind of you sort of share, Linda, as a sort of an outlook? Would you go along with that, or would you put it somewhere slightly differently?
I would put it even more extreme than that. The planet is dying. We've got people in the global south who are starving, who are being dispossessed, who are migrants because they simply could not survive in the place where their ancestors have lived and where they've always grown up. And the United Nations, I discovered recently, if you are displaced because of climate emergency, you're not a refugee.
Right.
You're a displaced person. And so they're not recognised, they're not counted. But this kind of disruption is why we're getting wars, why we're getting famines. I mean, like 15% of Pakistan, which is a really large country, underwater. It's absolutely appalling. Nation states disappearing. It's and it's happening here now. I mean, bonfire night when I grew up was cold, foggy. You needed to stand around a bonfire.
Yep.
I'm walking around in a summer jacket. this isn't somebody's turned up the temperature a bit. This is the planet in deep trouble.
Yeah, and so down my way we had the record temperature this summer, where I mean the thermometer in my garden hit 40 degrees centigrade, which was, that's unheard of in the UK ever before. Yeah, so that was a quite a surprising number, I think. Just from a local perspective, just in your back garden. So
the weather forecast this morning, they showed the temperatures as they should be as averages all this year, and they showed them as green bars on a bar chart, and then they put the temperatures that we have actually achieved during the year, and every single month has been above average, which this is the first time it's happened since records began.
Yeah,
10 months of the year all been above average.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a huge sense of probably concern isn't quite the right word, is it? It's worse than that. It's worry, it's fear, it's
anxiety.
Exactly. Yeah, all these things, and you see it having impact on people at all sorts of different levels.
It's deep grief. I feel.
Yes. Yeah.
Things are being lost. So, I mean, dare I say it? We're not quite the same generation. I'm slightly younger than you. I mean, I'm a child of the '70s, but I remember as a child.
A mere child.
A mere child, yeah. I've seen a lot of change through my life, so you guys must have seen even more. And certainly talking to my own mum, who's still with us, bless her. A huge amount of change in sort of 8 decades of stuff. I mean, a question from the chat here, which was relating to both of your books, showing a world devastated by sea level rise. The question for you guys, actually, and I'll take it one at a time because it's quite a serious question. I think it warrants quite a good answer. Do you guys have any optimism? Do you see a way, even in fiction, to turn this around? What's your views of can it be righted? I'll fire that at Linda first. Go on then.
Well, first of all, I want to say that the 1.5 degree target was actually an expression of failure. It was actually what developed countries felt they could achieve.
Yep.
1.5 degrees is devastating. And it's not a jolly that we should move along to. And actually, we're heading for more than 2 degrees. And there you're talking about massive, climate devastation. The delicate interplay of creation is being destroyed.
Yep.
And the knock-on effect, even down to sea level rise. So you talk about, that means that some countries will be lost. Our supply chains require ports. Our power stations require water to cool them, nuclear and coal and whatever. The society, civilization as it is being destroyed for the sake of the greed of a few multinational companies and super rich people, and that's really part of Storm Girl.
Okay,
what happens when the super rich finally have control, and the earth and the people on it are assets to be used for their convenience.
So do you see any hope that it can be turned around in a reasonable time frame, or do you see that it will collapse first, or that the end game for the super rich will be achieved by them, and like you say, the rest of us are just assets in a system?
What we've got is a economic system which counts no damage, counts no consequence, is a fairy tale. It believes that when you cease to use something, it ceases to exist. The only measure of success is profit.
We're
living beyond profit and growth. Growth is a myth. We're living beyond planetary boundaries, and we've got a large part of the world that's not having basic human rights. And that is because we've got a neoliberal economic system that really only values money, profit. And that's why we've got fossil fuel companies that are making obscene amounts of money every quarter and actually brag about it. It's astonishing. And behind that are people who actually, I have to suppose, really would prefer it if quite a lot of people on Earth died. Otherwise, I can't see how they could morally be doing what they're doing.
What they're doing. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so it's an interesting thing. I mean, Stuart, do you see it getting better at all? Do you see any hope of it improving? I mean, we've got global climate conferences, and we've got, there is push for greener technologies, and fossil fuel cars are being banned in the next 15 years. All those things are there, but do you see them being enough? Do you see it being turned around?
Well, I'm actually by nature an optimist, but no, I don't.
Really? Okay, interesting. Yeah.
We live in a world which is where the financial system is run by capitalism. And as Linda said, the problem with that is that capitalism is dependent, utterly dependent, on continual growth. You cannot have continuous growth in a finite environment.
Which is kind of very logical, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, you can't really argue with that. Yeah,
it's impossible. So it's an idiotic system, because even apart from the logic, it's incredibly unjust. The amount of talent there is in the world that is never actually allowed to develop because of the system we use it's really, really devastating. There are so many people with so many good ideas who could do so much if only they were allowed.
Yep.
But the system we live with doesn't allow that, because, as you say, there are a few individuals who have obscene wealth, and there are a large number of multinational companies that are running the world. Governments don't run the world anymore. It's run by companies.
Yeah, we've sort of seen that effect, certainly in the UK in the last few weeks, haven't we? With the government trying to push against the established might of the financial markets and getting quite a bloody nose over it. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Comment from the chat, which is the interesting username of Milan the Madman. Are we not already beyond the point of no return? All epochs of life have their day, and I think humans have overbred and overstepped our niche in nature. In time, we will go extinct like the species before us. The next form of life will fill our shoes. Do you think we could wipe ourselves out? Because I've had this chat with a few people saying, well, the planet will be fine eventually.
Oh yes,
it'll recover. It's humans imperiling themselves. And obviously imperiling quite a lot of the ecosystem at the same time. Do you see that as a potential outcome, perhaps, that maybe we'll just wipe ourselves out and then it's an epoch of history that goes?
I think to start, the super rich will survive. I read an article about somebody who was a green advisor, and he thought, to a conference, and it was a group of super rich people asking how can they keep their staff on board when the rest of the planet is down, because they'll actually have their own spaces. They'll have little fiefdoms, and he said you better look after them very well now, because they've all got families and friends. That kind of. But the truth is that there is the way to turn these things round, but all we have is empty words. There is the technology. We're not looking. I mean, I grew up in a time when your local council ran the electricity, stored gas, controlled water. It was done for the people. It's been privatised, and now what we've got is a water industry owned by China or whatever. And we just need to take back. There's lots, and so we're used to seeing megalith type of services, and actually there's lots and lots of really bespoke, niche, localized solutions to an awful lot of the things that's going on. For instance, along the coast, seagrass, actually sea kelp grows faster than rainforest and absorbs more CO2, and actually stops the height of waves. But we've actually, around the UK, we've destroyed our sea kelp forests and our wetlands and our reed beds and things like that. So there's lots of ways, but there's sequestering, there's lots of different ways that you can power things, different ways of creating energy and so on. But it's just that we are taught to believe in, that it's good if you go to a multinational company for your service, rather than going to something that is local and is in tune with your environment. And once we understand that, we can quite quickly turn things around, and the super rich would then have to go to Mars, I guess.
Maybe that's where they go. Yeah,
Well,
we can't have them going to Mars because then Stuart would have to write another book. So I mean,
Well, no, I had them doing that.
indeed. So I mean, it feels a very pessimistic. I mean, it is. You know, I mean, I can't disagree with anything you're saying at all.
I wouldn't call it pessimistic. I would call it realistic.
Realistic. I mean, but it's a
Um,
horrifying. You know, if we take the you know the perspective that you know there is a cabal of super rich people who want to you know to do this, and that they're you know that the rest of humanity is effectively you know an offering to be placed on the altar of profit and greed and their continued existence because they are the super rich. You know what is their end game? Is it to reduce the population dramatically? Because surely
well, I think
their
it'll happen
services will be
Yeah,
affected by such a thing.
we reduce the population of the super rich. Places, for a start, I would say that good contraceptive advice for every woman in the world would quite quickly do something about the population. It's not
Absolutely.
about countries that are highly populated because they actually contribute very little to the CO2 emissions.
Yeah.
It's the super rich and it's the developed countries,
Yeah.
and also things like, well, we know, don't we? America, India, China, and largely what we've done is we've exported our manufacturing base. We destroyed it in the 70s and 80s, and we've destroyed it to countries who now pollute the planet, producing goods for us to consume.
Yep, and obviously even
most
more.
of which we don't need.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I think-
obviously we have to transport those goods as well, which just adds to the problem.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I you know, I don't have a problem with not you know taking a plastic bag to Tesco's, obviously, to carry my shopping home in. But what you know what irks me a little bit about that is that I can't buy anything in Tesco's that isn't wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's yeah we are addicted to and it's very difficult for us as individuals. I mean, obviously there are things we can do. We do have some choices, but it's quite hard. I mean, in my situation, for example, I would love to buy things from a local butcher, let's say, or a local farmer, or a local greengrocer, but there aren't any. Yeah, in certainly not in walking distance. I might be able to get in a car and drive to a greengrocer, but it certainly wouldn't be a local one anymore because they just don't exist in my part of the world. So, I you know, every time I go to Tesco's, I feel like I'm part of the problem, and I'm part of, and I'd like to be part of the solution in some ways, but you know, I feel that the society is almost closed around me, and I don't have the options to do much about it in the kind of day-to-day life sometimes.
The
You used the
petrochemical
word just now, which was addiction, and I think that that's something which we ought to grasp as a reality. The problem with the ultra-rich is that they are addicted to money.
Yeah.
And what do you normally do with somebody who is addicted to a substance?
Give them more of it. Yeah. No, obviously not.
You
Yeah.
remove it.
Yep.
So that's what we need to be doing. But unfortunately, we're governed by idiots who have absolutely no foresight whatsoever, no imagination, and unless we can get rid of them, and this is in this country, I mean, the rest of the world is just as bad in many ways. I mean, fortunately, changes are taking place in one or two countries. With a bit of luck, Australia's just suddenly seen sense, and so has Brazil with luck. Mm-hmm. But there is a sort of right-wing movement throughout the planet at the moment, because people see their own particular lifestyle under threat, and when that happens, they automatically go towards nationalism.
Yep.
When the reality is that we are desperately in need of cooperation as a world, instead of all sitting in our own little seats and saying, "This is mine, you can't have any."
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
we need cooperation across the world, everywhere.
Yeah.
The petrochemical industry created the concept of a carbon footprint in the 90s, and what it does is it makes you feel guilty when you go to the shop and you buy something, and it takes away completely our perspective that it's actually them who's killing the planet. And so
Yes.
we worry about plastic bags.
It
And
forces it to
literally,
blame us.
should
Yeah.
I buy this or look at the air miles on that, when that's nothing compared to what the fossil fuel industries and the banks who fund them and the insurance companies who back
Yeah.
them, they're making billions, and we're blaming ourselves for a plastic cup because we forgot to take one with us when we went out and needed a coffee.
Yep.
So don't feel guilty about it, feel angry about it, and actually do something about it.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's good perspective to have. I mean, I don't feel in a. I mean, what are you guys' takes on the the sort of protesting that we're seeing? I mean, there a lot of people getting very annoyed at the protesters, and a lot of people getting very annoyed, obviously, they're protesting because they're very annoyed. I mean, and the UK is generally quite laid back about protesting, isn't it? It's not something that we naturally, I suppose, is in our psyche to do that much of. I mean, we certainly have had protests in the past, but I suppose as a nation, it's possibly not something that we're all that comfortable with. Sometimes, what's your take on, because peaceful protest has been tried, I would argue, and hasn't had the desired result. So, on one hand, when I see people,
that is going to be stamped on now.
well, they're new government bylaws and things coming in, aren't there? But what's your view on people like the Stop the Oil protesters and people like that?
They're acting out of desperation.
Yep.
So they're not the great unwashed. Or I was at a protest in London when Boris Johnson talked about mung bean munching crusties. We made a brilliant song about it.
Yep.
But we actually had to Google what was a mung bean, because none of us knew. It turned out to be bean sprout. We thought, yeah, okay, so we're mung bean munching protesters. But the truth is that peaceful civil disobedience does change the world.
Yes.
The civil rights in America, the Gandhi, the suffragettes, people like that, we do change the world. And what you do is you inhabit a sweet spot between, basically, if you're not being disruptive and a bit inconvenient, you're a pedestrian.
Yep.
You've actually got to inconvenience the system, and that is what they do. And there's different levels of it. I actually am part of a climate action group, and I teach people how to do peaceful civil disobedience.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Rights are, and what's the principles behind it, and how to stay safe, and what to expect, and things like that. So,
Right.
and I spent a night in a police cell. I got arrested in the middle of the road at the back end of 10 Downing Street, which I thought was a pretty good place to get arrested.
That's pretty cool.
That
Yep.
was- That'll come in a book at some point. But yeah.
Yep. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's the seriousness, obviously, of which the situation we're talking about, and from a I suppose from a writing perspective, would you say that the books that you've written recently, that both of you, are a sense of here's a story which contains my feelings, my thoughts, or is an expression of the anger or the frustration you feel over that, or is it more a case I've written this book to educate people to the issue? How would you describe your book? I'll go with you on that, Stuart, first. Is it an expression of your own feelings, or is it some sort of message?
Before it was edited, it was very much an expression of my anger, frustration, despair. But once it was edited, it became much more of a story,
Right.
which people will read, hopefully. And I understand why that's necessary. There's not much point in any of us standing there and becoming preachers, because it doesn't work. So you have to wrap your message in a very attractive binding, for people to actually accept it.
Yep.
Make the characters real people. Make the story a real story. Have some tension. Have some romance. Have some humour. In order to get the point across. But that's always there in the background. And so that the editing, because I write as a pantster, I can express everything I like on the page straight away, no messing. It's very messy. It's quite chaotic, but once I've actually done that, and I then start my own editing process, which I do about 10 times before I send it off to Fantastic Books Publishing, because they then use their own editors to fine tune.
To fine tune. Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. So that's your answer, Linda. How would you describe what you've written? Is it an expression of anger and frustration, or is it a lesson? What is it? What were you trying to achieve with it?
I'm just going to read you a couple of sentences from the synopsis I've written for the second book.
Far away, definitely. Yeah.
So, our terrorists are white, male, and wear smart suits. They fly in private jets and they run our government. There has been a coup, and you members of the press, you are its foot soldiers. So that's like distills.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's been a coup, and our terrorists are white, male.
And they've taken over. Yeah. So
they actually, yeah, they.
So I must admit, I haven't written an eco thriller myself yet. It's actually on my list of things to do, because my previous series of books that I wrote was based on the assumption that we don't solve this, that it all goes wrong, and we actually have to abandon the earth. So I made that assumption, because that, to me, I mean, and I'm dare I say it, quite a dispassionate sort of a fellow. It's quite hard to get me riled up on anything, because I'm just not that kind of guy. But so my basic, I tried to look at it logically. I think, is humanity capable of solving this issue? And my sort of judgment on that was probably not. I think we've had a discussion on that before, Stuart. We probably both agreed that it feels humanity isn't capable of organising itself well enough.
Look at history.
We fragment too quickly into different groups.
Every civilization that has ever been has collapsed.
Eventually, yeah.
For one reason or another. The difference now is that it's the world civilization that is in danger of collapsing, rather than regional civilizations. But I'm hopeful that there will be some people around once the dust settles, and hopefully there will be people who will keep in mind what has happened in the past.
Yeah,
there will be an entirely different place, entirely different. But there is a possibility that people might actually learn from the past.
Yeah.
You're actually creating an image there of civilization being like a Western civilization.
No, the whole world I'm talking about.
No, but I mean there are communities, indigenous people who've lived for millennia in balance with the planet. So that there are examples out there of sustainable civilizations. It's just that they don't fit the box that we generally
the other kind of status quo, the established correct way of doing it.
And they're also a tiny minority.
Well, they're probably. I think that numbers aren't necessarily a measure. I actually think if you're talking about civilization, survival, and actually living in harmony with the planet is a for me a good civilization.
That's what I was getting at, though. There will be people who will survive, and it will be people of that nature who are the most likely to survive.
Yeah. So, is there? I mean, do you? I mean, let's play author for a moment and go forward into the future. What do you? If you were to write a contemporary novel in 20 years' time, what do you think? What do you think things would be like then? I mean, I'm interested because a part of me looks at this and goes, well, maybe we'll sort of just muddle through and it'll sort of crumble around the edges as it seems to be doing, and maybe the crumbling will just continue to crumble for a long time. Or do you see a sort of catastrophic tipping point at which, at some point, something goes so badly wrong? Whether it's Siberian methane traps, or whether it's Arctic water circulation, or it's ice falling off Antarctica, or some kind of global catastrophic event, or maybe even a financial event that just basically brings the Western kind of stock market growth financial system to its knees, and that we have a 1920s era kind of Great Depression, but even worse. What do you see? do you see a gradual crumble into something else, or do you see a catastrophic cliff approaching?
I see a mixture. I think that there will be certain elements of life which will be, I was going to say untouched. No, nothing will be untouched, but which will be still viable.
Yep.
But I suspect that the vast majority of what we consider to be normal will be impossible. And I think that will happen quickly rather than slowly. I think one of the things that's happened recently is we have reached a couple of tipping points that were predicted to occur between 2017 and 2100. Yep. And they've already happened now. One of which is the impact of the temperature rise in Greenland.
Yep.
Yes.
With the melting ice.
The danger is that the ice sheet that covers Greenland could literally disappear very quickly. And the other, of course, is the Antarctic, where vast ice sheets are breaking up far more rapidly than they were ever expected to, which is releasing the ice from the continent itself. There are lots of consequences of these things that haven't really been looked at. One of which is, I forget what it's called now, something like bounce back, where the weight of the ice on the land disappearing can cause the crust of the earth to bounce.
Yeah,
literally,
because of the weight being removed.
In itself causes tectonic problems and potentially volcanic activity. If that sort of thing starts to happen, it becomes a runaway effect. So, lots of things could happen very, very quickly.
And that sea level, that ice melt actually dilutes parts of the normal cycle of movement of sea around the planet is like a conveyor belt.
Yep.
And the fact it's less saline because so much of it is fresh water that's melted means that it won't work, and so our seasons will cease to exist.
Yes. Yeah.
So there could be radical changes to seasonal temperatures and all sorts of things potentially. Yep.
But I think that what will happen even quicker than that is that, COVID was a good example of what happens when you tinker with nature. We've actually encroached so much on previously pristine rainforests and areas where humanity's never been, and things, nasty things come out of them.
Things catch us by surprise. Yeah.
Then you're taking that up, and that was, I think, COVID is a warning. This is a check. Are we getting any good questions? Because this is really deep.
Yeah, that's good. Well, people are commenting on the discussion actually. So, so let me just give you a flavour of some of the things that were coming through here. So, Alan says an excess of, so props to you, Stuart, includes a lot of debate about religion, some of which is very provocative. So, full marks to you for getting people thinking about that. So that's good.
It's the intention.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. In truth, countries don't go to war; governments go to war, and countries pay the price. Says Milan.
Absolutely.
So that's good.
Yeah.
Carl Sagan warned of the collapse of civilization. So one of my heroes, actually, Carl Sagan.
Yeah,
he was quite prescient on those kind of things. So, and the question actually is from Glenn. This is a good one. Do either of you think that a technological society can operate in balance with nature?
Define technology, I think.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking. Glenn may want to clarify that slightly, but I'm thinking. Let's say. Take us this evening. We're having a chat. Okay, we are using electricity, we are using the internet, we are using computers which need manufacturing, etc., etc., etc. Right? That is a technological capability that didn't exist 20 years ago, that we've invented since, and we're now using to have a chat across very, very long distances. Okay, so that's a technological society. Can we envisage an environment whereby we could have these technologies, use them, manufacture them, but in balance with nature? And if that's not the question that Glenn asked, I'll get him to clarify it in the chat. What do you think? Do you think it's possible to have a high-tech electronic situation without damaging the planet?
That yes, we just need to manage resources. We don't recycle. And if you remember the scandal about Amazon, when things get returned, they're put straight into to landfill. You know, Apple computers and so on, straight in there.
Yep.
Our waste is phenomenal. We don't mine our waste. I guess it hasn't gone away, so that resource is there. But often, research, for instance, medical research and other kind of research, is only funded if it's going to give somebody a profit.
Yep.
And
So
if
it comes back to the economic system that's driving
absolutely.
this. Yeah, yeah. So that's the fundamental. Because I must admit, I mean, you probably remember this more than I do, but I very, very clearly remember in the 70s, my dad taking the kettle which had broken and being able to take the element out of the kettle and replace the element in the kettle with a new one, such that the kettle could then continue to be used. I mean, the ability to repair things today is long gone for most equipment, for most people. I mean,
and that's quite deliberate.
Yeah, if my TV breaks, there's very little I can do. I know a bit about the insides of my computer from a modular perspective. I can replace bits of it. I mean, I'm a bit of an old car fanatic. I like my old cars because I can fix them. Right, I know how they work, and I can replace parts, and when they wear out, I can change them. Therefore, I can keep the car running longer. Whereas on a modern car, I would have no idea, and it's almost, I think of, we probably all got one, a mobile phone. They're items that get replaced very, very quickly, relatively, considering how complicated and significantly engineered they are, because they're not designed to be repaired. When
not only that, they're designed to fail, in the sense
at a certain point in time.
They cannot do the jobs that they are intended to do after a short while, because lots of other things that they interact with change.
Yep.
And that's
they become obsolete.
We have a MAD system which is run on competition, which results in the fact that so many systems are not compatible with each other.
Yep.
It's like the early days with plumbing, when you had one manufacturer making I don't know, whatever you like to call water pipes, and another manufacturer making taps. Neither of them, they didn't fit each other, so you had to buy from a particular provider. If we had a sensible approach to these things, everything would be would be normalized, it would be standardized.
Yeah.
So everything
able to interoperate.
At the moment, we have this idiotic system where Apple has got its own operating system, and Microsoft has got its own operating system, and they don't merge, they don't mix with each other. That's lunatic.
Yep.
It's of no help to anybody except for the people who are making money out of it.
You can actually get mobile phones that you build yourself, and if
Yes,
they break,
exactly. Yeah, you can. Yeah,
they exist.
yeah.
And not sure if it's China or Japan, they actually value things that are broken and they mend them in a way, like with gold, in a crack in a cup.
Yes, yeah, they've got a different view to it, haven't they? Yeah, I've seen that. It's lovely, that.
But there's things like visible mending, where you make something beautiful out of a tear in your jeans knee. You actually embroider things on it, or you patch it, and that's the kind of thing we need to. I've always thought, why isn't enough?
Yep.
By definition, it should be enough, but we're actually led to believe that nothing is ever enough, and we've always got to have more. But then you've got to have more, because every 6 months there's a new improved. And I'm thinking, well, I quite like the one that I had before, but I can't get it anymore. No, I've got to go for one that's improved.
It's so annoying. You can't buy the thing that you had last time. Because someone's improved it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like the shampoo I used when I was in the 1970s. It smelled really nice, lemon and lime, and I don't really actually need anything that you can smell down the street when I've walked past. But that's what we've got now, and that's improved apparently. It's nonsense. It's just to constantly make you feel like you're not good enough, or you haven't got good enough things, and you must work harder to buy more. And that's,
so do you? I mean, you've seen this over many years, and there's a question in the chat that's going in this direction as well, which I'll come to in a moment. But do you think it's people who are concerned about the environment come from all walks of life and come from all ages, but do you see it? Do you see different perspectives from different age groups in this? Because a lot of the people that I talk to, would say, oh, yeah, well, yeah, it's yeah, it doesn't concern me. It's somebody else's problem. And other people will be very upset about it. Other people just don't seem to care. And I don't know if is that something that you see over different age groups, or is that something you see? Um, you know, can you characterise it in any way?
Well, I talk to a lot of people on the street. I do a lot of outreach, and I have to say, 18 months ago, I could have been invisible.
Yep.
You know, people get raised look and they walk away around you as if there's some kind of force field around you that makes, you know, whatever. Now they walk up to me and talk.
Right.
They come.
Okay, so something's changing now. Yeah.
People of all ages, they come up and ask for a leaflet. People come back and give donations. There's a real social change happening. You know, you sort of see a dad with a child, and he says, you know, it's, you know, a load of rubbish. And I saw his son say, "No, Dad, this is important. I'm learning about it at school. These are the things." And equally, grandparents deeply concerned about what's going to happen to the grandchildren. You know, it's really, I can feel the change. It's nothing to do with age. It's frankly to do with which newspaper you read quite often.
Right.
Absolutely.
Where you get your information? Well, I suppose, yeah, more fundamental level, where you get your information from.
Yes.
Because I mean, I must admit, I've had, yeah, I mean, inevitably online, you have, you know, you can have arguments with people. Yeah, you know, but and it's very easy to get sort of sucked into a thing, and I think you're right. There are sort of echo chambers of opinion that circulate in certain circles, aren't there? It's sometimes wise to take a wide selection of stuff to read, even if you know it comes from a place where you don't agree fundamentally with the source, just to make sure you are getting all of the perspectives on the issue. Yeah. And then obviously take a view on it, because otherwise it's very easy just to recirculate the same stuff, which maybe doesn't help. So do you see? I mean, I wonder a lot about whether people in sort of in general terms are able to pick up and think about the longer term consequences of these things. I see an awful lot of people who just seem so concerned with the day-to-day, maybe inevitably the day-to-day needs of survival, or just the day-to-day needs of this is what I find that I want to do and gratify myself, and just simply don't look beyond the perspective of maybe even a few days or a week or a month or years, or certainly not decades ahead. How do we reach people like that? I mean, is this whole writing of books a good way to go about that, telling stories about the what ifs or the possibles and things like that?
3.5% of the population needs to be politically active or protest.
Yeah.
So that's a tipping point according to like sociological research. 3.5%.
3.5. Okay. Yeah.
So we don't actually need everybody to be on board, but you know, different people. You sow a seed, and it germinates. Something germinates at a different point for everybody.
Yep.
Everybody has a point where the penny drops. You think, good grief,
I've got to do something about this. Yeah, I've got to change
it.
Because I found it very interesting talking to my immediate peers around me. I mean, for example, the energy crisis. So in my household, we've turned down the thermostat. We're wearing more jumpers. Yeah, we got rid of our dryer. Tumble dryer, we don't use that anymore. I reduced the number of this, that and the others, switched to economy light bulbs. I made some changes, because of the, probably arguably mostly motivated by the fact that the electricity bill was going up, but made some changes to my lifestyle. But what I've noticed about an awful lot of people around me is that they're basically saying, no, why shall I change my lifestyle? I'm going to put up with the increased bill. And I'm like, that doesn't strike me as very logical. Yeah, it's an odd way to behave. But it seems an awful lot of people are inbuilt to say, no, my lifestyle, I deserve my lifestyle. I've worked hard to get to where I am, and I'm damned if I'm giving it up now for anybody, regardless of the external events. And I don't know, do you meet a lot of people like that, or is that something you encounter?
I have to say that I don't meet a lot of people these days, and that's actually quite deliberate.
Right.
I'm anti-gregarious. I prefer. I actually get upset by people walking in my forest.
Right. You've got your own forest. Excellent. Right.
But I live in the forest between.
Yep.
And there are times when I think, oh, go away. I don't want to meet you. I just want to enjoy the trees and the peace, quiet. So I don't make it. I, I occasionally have to join a group of people.
Yep.
For various reasons. I mean, tomorrow night I've got to go to a meeting because I'm a member of a charity and we've got our committee meeting. But you know, I don't want to go. It's not something I enjoy. It's something I'm going to do. So I'm probably not the best person to actually ask that question of.
What do you think, Linda? Do you think, do you find people are unwilling to make changes at an individual level?
Well, I mean, one thing, this again is back to the carbon footprint, that actually it's the rich 1% who think it's okay to fly to Paris for lunch.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who and business people who just fly, they could call the train, that kind of thing. They
could even do it online.
They could do it online, it's part of their lifestyle. They're the ones that are doing a massive disproportionate contribution to climate change. Most people, I mean, I forget how many millions of people in the world don't have a passport and will never leave their country. It's an illusion. I mean, and the lifestyle that people have is a media concoction that people have been taught to expect. But it's ever changing. I mean, I grew up where you had one set of clothes on and one in the wash, and I didn't feel deprived. I was glad, I like my clothes. Things like that. And
Me too.
everything I had as a child was fitted into one sideboard, and that was all my clothes and all my toys. And I had a lovely, outdoor life, lots of imagination and things like that. And this is about being taught to believe that somehow you're worth something if you can afford to buy something.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
The L'Oreal advert, isn't it? You're because you're worth it. Yeah.
It's bizarre because it is destroying the planet, and people don't value what they've got, and
always wanting the next thing.
Yeah.
But it's a manifestation of capitalism. Capitalism demands that people compete with each other, that countries compete with each other, that companies compete with each other. And what we actually need is not competition. We need cooperation.
Cooperation. Yep.
That's what we need. It's like government. We've got conflict politics going on all over the world. What we need is consensus politics. Let's all agree on things that we can do, instead of fight each other over things we can't do.
So, which I suppose goes back to the point.
Sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, it certainly makes logical sense. I think the thing is, we see this time and time again at lots of different levels in terms of but we fragment our structures, our societies, our companies, our political institutions, our economic blocks, whatever we want to call them, wherever they operate, they fragment at a certain level, because somebody says, but those guys over there, they're trying to pull one over, they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes and get an advantage over us. Do you think it's an innate human issue? Maybe due to our evolutionary background, that we grew up on a savannah and we had to compete for resources.
Absolutely not.
No.
We evolved to be cooperative. We would not have existed as a species if we did not cooperate. Because when we were on the savannas, we needed to cooperate in order to eat. It's only relatively recently that we've become tribal and competitive in the way that we have.
But what we have is a political system that is owned by vested interests, and the thing called the People's Assembly, the Citizens' Assembly, which is, instead of politicians giving you an a la carte menu and you go along and you tick that box and that box, you actually get a representative sample, a proper representative sample of the population. That's age, gender,
Yep.
ethnicity, abilities, everything to do with that. So that what you've actually got a group of people who have the common sense voice of the whole, community, and then you bring in experts, reputable experts, to tell them what the situation is, and they choose how that issue should be dealt with.
Should be dealt with. Yep.
Yeah,
So,
and that becomes then a mandate for politicians to do,
Yep.
which actually turns the whole thing on its head. And they are required to do that. It's a legal requirement that they do that. But what you've then got is a buy-in by the whole community. It's not divided along party lines, because they've actually all had their voice, and that is the solution to it's kind of getting rid of any kind of party system and actually asking people and involving them in choices.
So I suppose the thing there is that you're talking about a radical change to the political system and the economic system, which may absolutely be what we need to do.
It's been used in Ireland for the abortion
Yep.
debate. It's been used in New Zealand for quite a lot of their decision making. It actually does work, and I mean, very little controversy about the outcomes of it. So it is tried and tested,
and does have results.
Yeah. The beauty is that the lobbyists and the funders who want to influence it can't, because it's a disparate group of people representing society. So the power of the outside people to influence things is just cut away with a stroke. So I mean that's
which is why they fight against it, because they would not have the power to influence it post that kind of.
They wouldn't be able to make sure they got their profits.
Yeah, exactly.
So bringing this back round to writing then after that, that's a long chat through the, and I think it's because I mean if it's the essence of what your novel's about, that's very, very important, in terms of trying to encapsulate that, you've both chosen a fictional story to do that in, and Stuart's point about making it accessible by having characters that are fun, or having characters that are memorable, having a story that actually is a story rather than just a series of events, is all the writing technique. So what sort of challenges did you have trying to channel that emotion into a compelling tale that you hope people will then enjoy and then want to read? So, Linda, do you want to pick that one up? How did you channel that into a story?
Well, I kind of made the main character's development encompass what the audience would get out of it, as she discovers what world she'd been in a sort of kind of a quiet. She'd been kidnapped from a place where she'd been very protected, and as the world became apparent to her, it also becomes apparent to the reader.
Yep.
And she needed to be somebody that they could identify with.
Okay.
I think that was really important, that she was, as she grew, the and went through the grief of realizing what the situation was and who she actually is. I kind of used that kind of story, identifying with the main character, and I had quite a lot of fun with my baddies, because I actually, some of them are caricatures of existing people, and I put one or two in so I could kill them.
Well, which is the privilege of writers everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, by proxy.
If you annoy me, I shall put you in one of my novels and slaughter you in a horrible way.
What you say to a writer, exactly, and kill you.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's always good. Which is I always find quite concerning. It's like don't look at don't look at my search history, because you'll probably conclude I'm a homicidal maniac or something. How much acid does it take to dissolve a human body? All sorts of questions like that. So I mean,
like to be shot, and I also search checkers at the same time.
That's right.
So I did that on an incognito window.
That's right. Yeah, it's very useful. Then they can't track you so easily. Yeah, that's quite good.
Yeah.
So I mean, Linda, you've set yours in a near future. not too distant from where we are. But there are, it's very much seeds of hope. In terms of where the novel, it goes through as you kind of, I suppose, would expect from a narrative flow. It gets a lot worse before it gets better, which is a tried and tested way of telling a story, obviously, because it kind of, the character has to go through bad times before there to be any good time. But you've got glimmers of hope in the narrative. Is that a hope that you see for us in general, or was that just because that's the sort of story people expect to see? There's always going to be a happy ending, surely, because it's that sort of book. Or what do you think?
Well, my friends laughed their socks off that I'd actually had a love story in the middle of all this. They thought me writing a love story, that was hilarious. I got a lot of teasing about that. So there is that kind of human hope. I don't think that the story is finished. I have to say, having worked in public sector for years, change doesn't happen. It just gets called something else. You restructure.
Right size and downsize.
They get a new title and then they carry on doing what they always did. So I don't think that her story is complete. And I've got a plan for what happens next. I find it very difficult to kill people I like. That's one of the things.
So we'll try and stay on your good side then.
yeah. Only the ones that I really don't like. So so that just like the human story within that, and there was lots of glimpses of things like there was a feast, and there was like rare fruit, and one of them was a banana.
Yep.
And I sort of watch my friends get that bananas are actually not fertile fruit; that they're kind of clones, and we just need one disease to wipe out what we've got, and we can't breed anymore. So that kind of thing. There's lots of little things. I did quite a long explanation at the back, which challenged people to sort of understand modern slavery and things and so on. Okay. So I kind of used the ending, the afterward, to pin down some of the themes in it as well. So human story, lots of drama, kill off your baddies, can't kill the good ones, and then have an explanation at the end.
Okay. So is that? I mean, is it? You sort of alluded there that there's more to come. It's not a standalone novel then? Do you see? Do you see a sequel? Do you see a series of sequels? Where's it going?
I think there'll be a sequel. There are characters that, anyway. Yeah, there's plenty. I think that I've actually got scope to write another one, but I'm actually enjoying writing this one about at the moment about the terrorists actually being lobby groups. I've got Tufton Street in there. I do like the little things like that. Just that actually pinned down to reality, like that. So I'm quite enjoying that, and I've got quite a fun.
So is that a separate book? A different one?
Yeah, that's an entirely different story.
Right.
It's about,
okay.
Yeah. So I think there will be, but not quite yet.
Not quite yet. Okay, so we'll have to come back and look at that one. All right, Stuart. Sort of same question. I mean, are you, the narrative structure that because you're quite experimental, dare I say it. I mean, I remember reading, Generation Ma stuff, and it's not
first book in particular. Yes.
Yeah, it's not how I do books, shall we say? Because I mean, you do all sorts of. I mean, I'm quite dull and boring. I write kind of chronologically. And I tell it from a third person narrator perspective, and that's basically it. That's it. Yeah, I don't vary from that. That's me. And as you know, I'm a plotter. So you pansters, have my admiration, because I can't do that. But
I can't plot.
Yeah, well, but you employ all sorts of things like letters that a character is reading, or a news article that gets chucked into that point in the story, and then maybe there's a bit of dialogue between different. You do all sorts of stuff. So I haven't read in an excess of what sort of approaches have you taken, because you're quite experimental normally in the way you work. So
in an excess of, it's a straightforward narrative.
Okay.
And it's told from the point of view of one character.
Right.
But the characters that are there have been placed into an environment over which they have little control, because I wanted to use that as a metaphor.
Right. Okay.
The way the world is. So they're basically on a ship, which I won't give you the details, but the ship sinks, and the 6 characters escape on the very poor lifeboat,
Right.
and are washed up on the shores of a real island, one that I actually found that used to be inhabited until the 1960s, when droughts in the area meant that people couldn't live there anymore.
Okay.
So they get washed up on this island, and they are from different backgrounds. I deliberately had them going to, they were all going to the same place, apart from one of the characters who's the captain's wife. The other 5 characters were all going to an ecumenical conference in Australia. That's where they were bound.
Right.
And they're all from different religions. So that was quite deliberate, because one of my particular pet peeves is religion.
Right. Yep.
I feel is a wonderful way of making people believe things for which there's absolutely no evidence, and therefore allowing people, or actually making people more likely to believe things for which there's no evidence, which is one of the problems of the modern world. So I deliberately did that. And so there are sort of two parts to the story. The first part is how they survive on the island.
Right.
One of the characters, the narrator, is actually quite clued up on environmental issues. The rest of them aren't.
Okay.
They're complacent, you know. It'll all pass.
It'll be fine. Yeah.
But of course, it's set 10 years hence.
Okay.
And by that time, I had envisaged that we would already be starting to suffer from some fairly major climatic events, including the Arctic and the Arctic ice disappearing completely.
Yep.
Greenland having lost a lot of its ice, and the Antarctic having lost quite a lot of its ice shelves. So that they're in tropical waters, but they see icebergs.
Okay. Yep.
Some of which are quite large.
Yeah. Breaking off from Antarctica, I guess. And
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's those sorts of things. And then an event occurs on the island, which gives them the slight possibility that they might be able to escape. And then that's the second part of the book, is the way in which that unfolds, and their arrival in a different country, where they discover that the latest iteration of COVID is
okay.
very,
you're really putting these characters through the ringer.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
every time they think they've escaped, something worse happens.
And those are the 2 sort of elements that I've used, you know, and they end up in a society which some people would find very disturbing. Other people think, well, that's a really good idea. So that's for the reader to decide which side they're on.
Which one. So, I mean, having touched on, I mean, in the course of this conversation, having broken all the taboos about conversations, which never talk about religion or politics, now we've managed to come.
Never stop me.
Yeah, which is good. I mean, we certainly on the stream we've had chats about religion and stuff in the past as well. I mean, I tend to, you know, I suppose I tend to head in your direction a little bit. That I'm you know, my viewpoint would be very, very scientific. If there isn't evidence for it, then, you know, I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with people believing things that they want to believe if they're not, you know, if they're not in decision-making places in charge of my life, or, you know, or requiring me to adhere to, you know, what they believe because some holy book tells them that they need to do it. If they want to do that in their own private time, then that's absolutely fine. So that tends to be my sort of perspective on
that's
this.
That's an interesting point, but unfortunately, it isn't the reality.
Indeed,
I mean,
yeah. And the
reality is that our children are taught mostly in faith schools.
Yep. Yep.
So they're indoctrinated with the idea. And, you know, that should be done away with completely.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Children should be allowed to make up their own minds.
Yeah, and maybe not talk too much about it until the point where they're less impressionable about it.
Talk about the existence of them, but not the, not driven into the dogma.
Indeed.
Yeah, I have a problem with people having some kind of belief that sees them through life's difficulties, but I have a real problem with religion. As I'm concerned, it's a man-made concept used to control people.
Yeah,
exactly. That's precisely what I'm concerned about. Yeah,
and it stops critical thinking, arguably, and other things like
very
that.
much so.
Encourages those sort of things.
The enemy of all religion is questions.
Yep. Yeah, interesting. I mean, I suppose in my novel, I mean, Stuart, I know you've read the Shanewood stuff because you've written some jolly nice reviews, so thank you very much for that. And I've touched on the religious thing. I don't think I was doing the sort of allegory things that you sort of describe more in your sort of work, because I'm not a big fan of allegory in I just don't do it in my stories. It's not what I do.
Well, you say that, but there are allegories.
Well, there are. I think if you choose to put them there, I would argue. I'll give you the opportunity to see some allegories. Can I get away with that, maybe? But I've always been fascinated by it, because as a child, I went along to Church of England school.
Me too.
And Church of England church, every Sunday. It's what you did as part of the social life that I led in that time in the 70s. And yet so my mum was quite traditional in that regard and went to church because that's what you did. It was a good social thing to do, and that's what you were expected to do. Blah 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 blah. You know what I mean. Whereas my dad was much more staunchly sort of atheist and scientific in his upbringing. So I had this sort of dual thing. On one hand, at the age of 7, I was being told that God created the heavens and the earth, and there were 2 animals going into the ark, and then Moses came down from the mountain. And on the other hand, I was getting Carl Sagan basically telling me that that the universe was 4.8 billion years old, and the supernovas and etc. So I from a very young age, I was very, very conscious of a dichotomy between the two. And I suppose that's always come through in my writing, as I've always felt the need to have some religion in there, and I've deliberately shied away from real religions, if that makes sense. I've always made one up, so I can comment upon it without fear of upsetting somebody, probably. But I did write a book. I don't know if you've read it. I did write a book about fundamentalist Christianity. The first book I ever read, actually, first book I ever wrote was a contemporary novel, which is not my usual sort of space. And I did write a novel about fundamentalist Christianity versus science. One of those books I felt I had to express before I could kind of get on with all the other stuff that I wanted to do. So I will touch upon it. But it's a rich source of inspiration as a writer, I suppose.
Yeah, I grew up in a family that was completely irreligious.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
I went to Sunday school, I think, to get me out of the house so that my parents could be together on a Sunday morning. And you got back and had your dinner. So the whole thing, it goes over my head. I don't understand any of the symbols or any of the language, the colours of the costumes, the number of badges like Kenny Everett, lapel badge, all of those things.
All those sort of things.
Entirely bizarre and unknown language, which I think probably I did quite well to miss.
Yeah.
But I'm not very good at being told what to do, so it's probably just as well.
Well, it's interesting because I have. I went to what I suppose Stuart would describe as a faith school, I suppose. Because I still, and oddly enough, I still have a fondness for some of the rituals that I experience. I mean, for example, give me a good Christmas carol. I love a good Christmas carol, even though I've got no, the story that's contained in the Christmas carol. Obviously, I don't believe.
So the big faults of the church always says the devil's got the best tunes, but actually
the church. So there is that.
There's some very, very lovely.
And some of the hymns are beautiful. Charles Wesley, bless him. Beautiful pieces of music, and something oddly. And I get why people find it comforting.
Oh, yes.
I completely get why people find it comforting.
I was raised as a Christian. Went to Church of England, went to school, went to a Church of England school. I was a choir boy in the local choir. in the local church, and I was actually at one stage going to be a vicar. I wanted to be a
Wow.
priest.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And then at 16, 2 days after my 16th birthday, my mother was killed in a road accident. We were all churchgoers, and the church did absolutely nothing for the family. We were all devastated, as you can imagine.
Yeah. That shocking event.
And what that did for me was it made me start to question, because until that point I'd just accepted everything. And as a result of that, I read the Bible from cover to cover. What an appalling, absolutely dreadful.
Needs a good edit, doesn't it? Yeah.
From cover to cover and still worship the God that is displayed there has got some very strange moral compass, because it glorifies rape, it glorifies slavery, murder.
Yeah, I mean it's a Bronze Age book, isn't it? I mean that's the thing to bear in mind about it.
And
yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
As a result of that, I also read a lot of other books about religion. I was just curious. I wanted to find something which would spiritually, help me. And I read the Quran cover to cover. That is probably the most boring book I have ever read. How any adult could read that and be converted, I find incomprehensible, and I do mean that literally incomprehensible.
Yeah.
But that happened.
I have an irresistible urge to heckle street preachers.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And I do quite regularly.
Yes.
And like charismatic men who stood there with their women who hold his coat and stuff while he does some kind of preaching. I'm right in there. Absolute load of rubbish.
Yeah.
The whole issue is all about control. It's got nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah.
I get real spiritual fulfillment in the forest.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's that.
Really
I suppose that's something I would definitely subscribe to, is that I feel, I suppose, most at ease in nature. So if you put me on a mountainside or in a forest or near a nice waterfall or something like that, I would draw a great sense of peace from it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Keeps me sane. Well, sort of.
I was going to say, steady on there. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, bringing this back around, I mean, there's a question actually. Fantastic Books has chucked a question in, probably trying to stop us from going too deep into a great deep topic. So question for Linda. We know you love games, right? Okay, so can you imagine a game set around the broken, resource-starved world of Storm Girl? So I'll chuck that one in. A game based around a book or the story?
I think that probably a video game.
Right.
My daughter is a games designer. She actually creates the Gute Fabrik. She works there when they create video games. So I could see that kind of thing where you make choices.
Yep.
I'm not quite sure about a board game.
A video game with sort of questy things in it kind of makes sense. I can kind of see that. Yeah.
Yes, sure, a video game with a character-driven one. I still want to get bodies killed, so there'd have to be some fighting.
Roll the dice and the Lego. Okay, yeah, that's good. Stuart, you've been asked about whether or not that you could have a board game based around Generation Mars. Does that make sense? Do you is that something you think you would create, or?
I'm entirely the wrong person to games because I don't play them, and there's a very good reason I don't play them. I've very, very occasionally dipped into the field of games, and I know that if I got involved, I wouldn't do anything else. I'd become addicted.
Yeah,
so
too much time. Yeah.
Thing to do that I'm just not gonna get involved. So I don't.
I feel the same about housework. If I did it, I could get really good at it.
Yeah, that's even more dangerous. Let's not go down to the housework.
Can't see the dust on themselves.
I think I feel. I mean, I suppose that makes me on to my next question because I've been asking about Shade, and I can't imagine Shadewood being a very good game. it doesn't feel to me like it would be a game. But I suppose that brings a question on, if you could wave a magic wand, I mean, other than fixing the planet and stuff, obviously, but if you could wave a magic wand around your works, where would you like to see? What would you like to see happen to your book? I mean, would you have ambitions for it to be turned into a film or a TV series, or in your ideal world, where would your writing journey take you? I'll let Stuart go first on that one.
Well, my other creative activity is photography.
Right.
Where I started off in life, I was a professional photographer for a while. And
back in the days of 35mm film and all that kind of good stuff. And
Oh yeah. my writing is very visual.
Right. Yeah.
And deliberately so, because that's this is where I get my worldview from.
Right.
So yes, I would love to see all the books I've written as films.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
I think they are all filmable. I wouldn't get involved, however, because writing for a film is an entirely different thing.
I think writing for a book. Yep.
Novel.
Yep. I could definitely, having read the Generation Mars stuff, I could definitely see that being a TV series. I think that would I could see that definitely happening. It's probably too much material for a film, I'd have thought, but
good old Netflix.
Yeah, some sort of Amazon Prime special or something. Yeah, that'd be quite good. What about you, Linda? Would you like to see Storm Girl turn into a TV series or a film, or?
I think it would be a good film. I think that it's got really good, strong female characters. I think it would, there's. I tried to do things like make older people strong, resilient, creative, experienced people, rather than I tried not to caricature a lot of like that. That was really quite important to me. I have a friend who looks after the dog of somebody who used to scout for Netflix.
Okay.
But COVID happened, and she tried to get him to read it, and all of the companies that he'd worked with had gone bust, and he was so distraught. He says, "Don't even give it to me. I won't read it." So I got really close there.
Oh no.
Yeah,
it's just unfortunate the way
I think it would make a really good film. I'm not quite sure where to film it with all of the devastation and so on, but actually quite a lot of it already exists.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Question for you, Stuart. He says he would not get involved in the script writing for a film version of his books, but would you cringe at what they did to it without your input?
I said that my first steps into fiction was a radio play.
Yep.
As a result of that being broadcast, I was approached by a London literary agent who got me involved in writing scripts for television.
Right.
And I wrote about 14 or 15 of these things, every one of which got as far as what's known as the round table, which is where they all sit around and say, and none of them got any further.
Right.
My subject matter, I didn't realise this at the time. I was only fairly young, 28, 29. Largely because my subject matter was far too controversial.
Right. Okay. Yep.
For the television channels.
So I suppose that's an interesting point.
I understand the mechanics of the process. You see.
Yeah. So you knew what you're doing in regards to how it worked.
One of the things I did in preparation for that was I did a dramatisation of Pride and Prejudice.
Okay. Yep.
Which of course has been done really well by the BBC since. Not mine.
Yeah. Mr. Darcy.
But it was a really good illustration of the difference between writing a novel and writing for the visual medium.
I must admit, I've never tried writing for anything visual. I wouldn't know where to start, to be honest. So, it's quite interesting to see how that changed. I suppose that brings us on to the question then. So, I mean, writing on controversial topics like you two have done. I suppose you could argue maybe it isn't a controversial topic, but it's a topic that certainly is, a difficult one for people to both read about and be involved in, and so on and so forth. has that influenced the route you've taken to get it published? Well, yeah, and by obviously we're ultimately going Fantastic Books Publishing here because it's the MABLE event, but subtle hints are here again. But do you think that eco thrillers are in vogue with traditional publishers, or do you think they would shy away from them being a little bit controversial? Or what's your perception of the reception of these sort of books?
Yeah, there are some thrillers around, and the subject has been dipped into in certain other stories.
Yep.
One or two books I've read that where there's been it's been an aside rather than the main topic of the book. My simple answer to how I approached it from the publishing point of view is Dan's published my work for quite a number of years now.
Yep.
I was extremely fortunate that he liked a short story that I wrote, a short science fiction short story that I wrote, and invited me to submit some stuff. As a result of which he published, as as an unknown writer, publisher, to publish my adult fantasy trilogy, which consists of 3 very thick books. The entire story is well over 600,000 words.
Wow.
Now, if I'd tried to approach one of the major publishers with that, they'd have just laughed. So having got on board with Fantastic Books Publishing and having had a really, really good working relationship with Dan, I've sent him everything that I've written since, basically, except with I wrote a medical memoir about the fact that I had ME CFS for 10 years, and I recovered from it, which is quite unusual. People don't recover from it, and so I thought I could help people out by going through my process and so. But I wanted to give 50% of the proceeds to a charity that had helped me during that period. So I self-published that one. But otherwise, everything I've written since, it's
gone through. Okay, well, that's good. So I suppose, Linda, then, how did you get involved? Did you have Fantastic Books in mind prior to writing Storm Girl, or had you written it and then came across Fantastic Books? What was your plan with Storm Girl to get it to the public?
I think you flatter me to think I had a plan. I joined an organisation called Scooby, Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and initially Storm Girl was going to be a young adult.
Okay.
And I went along there, and it's a beautiful organisation, and one of the things that it does is it does a sandwich kind of feedback. We start off with something good, then you say what can be improved, and then you end up with something that is very encouraging too. So you don't go away completely beaten, but you've got you've got some good stuff to work on and a bit of encouragement as well. So I did an awful lot of really good learning in that situation, both giving and receiving feedback as I was writing Storm Girl. And they have good conferences, and I've been to conferences and sort of had sessions with agents and editors and stuff like that at these conferences. And so I've just been kind of sucking up information and knowledge, and it is my first novel. I'm still learning quite a lot, but I was really lucky that Fantastic Books took it on as a first novel, and a fairly hard-hitting, controversial subject with some shocking things at the end to say actually all of this is already happening. And they were just so helpful. I learned a massive amount from the editing process, probably as much as I've learned anywhere. Really,
it's quite a good quite a good experience, that one, isn't it?
Yeah, really. So I count myself really very lucky to have found it quite so soon. I didn't actually expect to get it published. I just thought it was a good practice run.
Okay, well,
maybe I'll do something good enough later on, when I've had a bit more go at it.
So I mean, well, that's encouraging actually to hear that. That's really good. I suppose we've talked a little bit about the fact that you might have another novel in the works then, but what's your aspiration as a writer? What does dare I use the word success, which feels a bit too close to growth or but what does success look like for you as a writer? Is it selling a bunch of books? Is it getting your message out there? Is it making a difference to the planet? What does success look like for you, Linda?
I think that to be well enough read for people to see some of the truths that's going on out there, because mine both of my novels are based on what is actually happening now. So I wanted to get that across, but in a way that people identified and couldn't stand back and say, well, that's not going to happen to me, because they get engaged in characters that it is happening to.
Yep.
And they're invested in that, so they sort of feel closer to that kind of thing. I'd like to think that I was published, sort of fairly well known, but as far as I can see, unless you're you're a famous person with a ghostwriter, that you don't really get onto the shelves at the moment.
Yep.
So I don't know
it's a very asymptotal graph, isn't it? It's only the very small 1% of the 1%. Yep.
Yeah, but equally, I get an enormous amount of satisfaction. I mean, I write, and then I go back and read it and think, who the hell wrote that? And then I think, well, actually, I did.
Well, which is great. Yeah, that's a nice feeling, isn't it?
I fight myself constantly with it, so I enjoy the process as well. So you've got.
I must admit, I once had an email from somebody. It was several years ago now, and this piece of text was quoted in the email, and I remember thinking, where the heck's that come from? That's actually quite good. I realised it was something I'd written and I'd forgotten about it, which it sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet a bit, but it was a genuinely like, oh, that's actually quite good. Where's that from? That sounds vaguely familiar. I'd forgotten what it was. It's quite nice, I think, if every so often you come across a piece of your own stuff and actually that bit I got that to work. That was good. So that's quite good. There's a question that's just come in for you there, Linda. So were you already a sci-fi fan, or did the sci-fi stroke sort of dystopian genre just fit what you wanted with the storytelling? So is it? I mean, I suppose an accompanying question: is it a sci-fi novel? Or is it a contemporary novel set in the near future?
It's realistically near future.
Yep.
It's not a fantasy world. It's a world of horror that is around the corner.
So it's a plausible future dystopian state, not too far away, alas.
Yeah. So I've forgotten the beginning of the question.
So, it was more a case of were you already a sci-fi fan? So would you say you're a sci-fi fan, or?
I've read quite a lot of feminist science fiction. That is good. And things. Woman on the Edge of Time by Marge Piercy is an absolute classic, and very clever. So I'm not interested in classic science fiction. I quite enjoy films and things, but I wouldn't read it. But that kind of other world, or turning things on their head, so you can
alternative reality almost type things, kind of
the dispossessed,
what if stuff. Okay, interesting. Stuart, you mentioned you are a sci-fi fan, but you tend to have a lot of themes of dystopian kind of society breakdown stuff in your work. So dare I say it? Is that just a place that you like writing in?
It's traditional sci-fi, isn't it? If you think in terms of the sci-fi that's been considered to be classics, look at 1984, Animal. Oh God, I've forgotten the other one now. But there are
sort of Fahrenheit 451 and things like that.
That sort of stuff. They foretell the future. It's a warning, isn't it?
Yes. Yep.
And in a sense, that's part of what I want to do. As far as what my ambition, if you like, as a writer is concerned, I just want to be read.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Want people to read the stuff, and I find nothing nothing more satisfying than when I have a review written and somebody clearly understands what I'm at.
Yeah,
That's
what you were trying to get across. Yeah,
that's brilliant, and I have had those, which is for all my books, and that is really great. You know, occasionally you get somebody who hasn't got a clue what you're writing about the reviews. You know, that's isn't it?
I have to say, I mean, I've used this one many times on my stream. I get the occasional email. I haven't had one. I haven't had one for a while actually, but I've certainly had one in the last couple of years where someone's basically said, that bit in chapter 6 where you counterpose the the Moldavian people's struggle for independence, and I'm going, I don't think I did. But yeah, I was like, what did I do there? Yeah. Occasionally you do get, I think you occasionally do get misunderstood, but there we go.
Yeah. Somebody asked me, why did Angel's grandma wear glasses?
Yep.
Well, because she could, you know.
Yeah, because that's how she was. Yeah, she had bad eyesight, you know. Sometimes the red door is just a red door, as I like to say to my children. Yeah. There's no other reason for it other than that.
I like it when people say that, you know, they couldn't possibly read science fiction because it's too out there, and I'm thinking, you do realise all fiction is actually fiction. None of it's real.
It's all made up. Like, yes, that's right.
We've all made it all up, you know. Yeah, it's.
I've been told now in the chat that I write allegory. I just don't know it. Stop it.
You do?
Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, I suppose real world inspirations are always going to be a thing there, aren't they? But so yeah, so that's quite good. So I mean, sort of to wrap this up. I mean, we're kind of out of time, perhaps a little bit over now, but. We've talked a little bit about, well, quite a lot about, the state of the world and the various things that are in it. Going back on the writing, I suppose, just to summarise, if you had a final message to put in your story that you would really want people to take away from the book, or this interview, or anything, what is that message? Is it a message of hope, or is it a message of no, we're stuffed, it's game over? What's the message that you want to leave people with?
I think I'll go first. If
go on then, yeah. Far away, Linda. Yeah,
we're an immensely creative, problem-solving race.
Yep.
It's not beyond us to keep the planet inhabitable, to give people who've suffered the worst and done the least to deserve it justice, and to save the life on Earth and to repair. We're perfectly capable of doing that, but we actually have to take it as it's urgent. If we haven't really got this sorted out within this decade, then we're toast. And it doesn't have to be like that, but we have to deal with the grief and face it, or stop denying it and act. That's what I would say.
That's the message. Yeah.
Is the message. It doesn't have to be like this.
Doesn't have to be like this, but there's hope, but only if we act soon.
The answers are out there.
Yep.
The research is done. We have the science. We have the capability. We need to put our money where it needs to be, and actually, the world would be a better place if we did that.
I remember seeing a thing. It was a cartoon, basically, with presumably some sort of climate conference or something being caricatured a bit, and it basically said, what? Yeah, and there's this guy basically standing up and basically saying, but what if we just, it turns out it's not true and we just make the world a better place.
And yes, that's right. There's a really good film called 2040, and it's like a documentary, but actually a story as well. And the premise is that this guy has a little girl, and he's talking to her when she's 20, and she's asking him about, why didn't you do these things? And it's actually a documentary, and he travels around the world showing where the solutions are, like kelp forests, like wetlands, like
all the other things,
generating energy, all of the things that we actually have the technology to do now, but the world is looking in a different way. So that's a really hopeful film to watch, 2040.
2040. Okay, well, that's a good recommendation. That's good. Stuart, your final thoughts, your final message. What do you want people to take home?
I absolutely agree with what Linda's just said. We are an incredibly creative, inventive, and largely intelligent species. But we have got sidetracked by our extraordinary love of things, most of which we don't need at all. And they've become a measure of status. And status is important to people. So people think that if they haven't got this or that, they are lower down in the pecking order. And frankly, judging ourselves by our possessions and others by their possessions is plain lunacy.
It's lunacy, isn't it? Yep.
It's just nonsense, you know. So yeah, we have the capacity to make the world a really beautiful, wonderful place for everybody, if only we share, if only we cooperate, instead of having this lunatic situation where very few individuals, because of psychotic problems, have to have some sort of power, some sort of control over the rest of the world, usually driven by fear. I mean, look at Putin. I mean, his entire battle against Ukraine is entirely down to fear of his own position. A man driven by vanity, and millions of people are suffering because of that. This is lunatic. Why isn't the rest of the world doing something about it?
Yeah.
And yeah, as you can tell, I get really, really frustrated.
Well, it's good. Yeah.
I can see that we could live in a world where everybody was happy.
You just got to find a way to make it happen.
Had enough.
Yep.
Everybody had enough. And no more than enough, because enough should
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And being
enough.
satisfied with with enough.
It's enough. It's enough. You don't need to do any more. You don't need to work any harder. You don't need to buy anything else. If you've got enough, then that's enough. But that's just not what we're taught, are we? We've always got to have a newer, bigger, better, faster.
Yeah.
And things. Well, there we go. I mean, there's a a summary, I suppose, of what the challenges that face. It's been an absolute pleasure, guys. Thank you very much for coming on. The chat is still chattering about all the different topics. So when it gets uploaded to YouTube, you'll have a chance to go and reread all the things, because it was going too fast at times for me to actually even read it out. So that's quite good. I should really say, I suppose, this is the final MABLE interview of the MABLE thing, isn't it? So this is kind of the end of the whole MABLE saga for Fantastic Books. So thanks to them for organising this and keying up all the different authors for me to have a chat to. That's been great fun for me. So thanks to them. I will include a link to your books in the video once it goes back up, so that people know where to find various other bits and pieces as well. So so 6 weeks of MABLE comes to an end. I think I might keep doing some more of these author interviews with other folks as well, because they seem to be doing quite well, which is, it's fun to have a chat with different authors and find out what motivates them as well. So that's really, really good.
I did interviews with all the authors, all the MABLE authors.
Yes, that's right. So actually, it's worth. I'll dump a link to your blog actually into the links as well.
And I deliberately asked them all the same question.
Yeah, it's quite good, and all the answers are very different.
Give an illustration of how different people work in different ways, and it turned out to be the case.
It is,
really,
which is excellent.
See the results.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Thank you very much indeed for this, Drew.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Stuart.
Really,
thank you,
really good.
Thank you, Linda, for coming across as well. So thank you for an interesting interview. So I hope you've enjoyed it as well. It's been fascinating listening to it, and I can heartily recommend. I mean, Stuart's books I've read in the past, so I know they're good. Linda's, I haven't read yours yet, and Stuart, I haven't read In Excess of yet either, but they're on my read list, so I will get around to them. But I can heartily recommend them based on previous works. And Storm Girl sounds absolutely fascinating. Actually, it sounds right up my street. Actually, so
it's a brilliant book. I'm really impressed with it. Really.
Excellent. Well, there's a hearty recommendation. So anyway, it just reminds me. Thank you all the guys on stream who've been listening to us chattering away. Thank you for all the questions. For that, it's always been a pleasure to have you guys along as well. Thank you to Linda. Thank you to Stuart. Thank you to Fantastic Books. And I will wrap up there. Look after yourselves, everybody. Have a fantastic week ahead. And as always, my friends, as always, write on and be good.
Thank you.
Thank you.